A patrolman considers himself king of his own little kingdom, the suburban neighborhood of Maplewood Heights. He's lived here, worked here long enough to know the rules. He knows who belongs here and who doesn't. Then a black woman appeared, out of nowhere, suddenly moving into one of the nicest houses on Elm Street, alone. That made him uneasy. How? Where did the money come from? There had to be something fishy. Someone like her couldn't have gotten that kind of thing honestly, he thought. And he, as the custodian of this area, felt it was his right, even his duty, to ask, to let her know who was in charge here. A small protection fee to make sure everything was smooth was a given. Who's new here and shouldn't be considerate? He thought it was only fair, but she dared to refuse flat out. A black woman dared to say no to him right in his neighborhood and even dared to raise her voice about laws, about rights. Ridiculous. He was the law here. That insult, that defiance was unforgivable. He had to teach her a lesson, had to let her know the consequences of not knowing her place. The insults, the curses poured out, a language that he believed people like her would understand. But she was still not afraid, that gaze still hatefully calm. Then he had to resort to stronger measures, a language that everyone understood. He pulled out a gun and pointed it at her. Not exactly to shoot, just to remind, to see the fear in her eyes, to force her to submit. That was how he always kept order. But then, just one phone call from her made his blood freeze. The gun felt heavy, a mistake, a fatal mistake. Who had he messed with? What consequences awaited him after that fateful call? His career, his freedom, everything he had was crumbling because of his own stupidity and prejudice. Listen to this story to witness the downfall of a tyrant and the price. He paid for daring to look down on others. The soft golden light of a late autumn afternoon filtered through the old maple trees, casting a warm glow over the cobblestone streets of the suburban Maplewood Heights neighborhood. The neighborhood exuded a peaceful, well-off feel, with its well-appointed homes nestled behind manicured lawns and lush hedges. For Sophia Carter, the two-story classic red brick house at 12 Elm Street, where she had moved in just a few days earlier, promised a rare peace, a refuge from the stress, complicated cases, and brain-crunching decisions of her Washington, D.C. headquarters. At nearly 50, Sophia was still trim and had a sharp, intelligent face. The wrinkles at the corners of her eyes only added to the air of experience and quiet power she exuded. She stood on the porch wearing comfortable beige slacks and a cream cashmere sweater, a cup of warm tea in her hand, quietly surveying her new neighborhood. The move had been exhausting, but the feeling of breathing fresh air and hearing birds chirping instead of honking horns made her feel like she had made the right choice, at least for now. She sipped her tea, her dark brown eyes narrowing as she saw a local police cruiser drive slowly past her house, then stop on the opposite side of the road. A white policeman in his early 40s got out. He was stocky with a rough face and blonde hair. He adjusted his uniform cap and strode across the street, heading straight for her porch. Sophia put her teacup down on the small table beside her, keeping her composure but feeling a little weary. She recognized him. He was a neighbor a few doors down and also a police officer who patrolled the area. She had caught glimpses of him a few times in the days since she had moved in, and his unfriendly, scrutinizing gaze had caught her attention. "Good afternoon," the officer said as he approached, trying to smile, but it looked strained. His name tag read J. Ramsey. "I'm Officer John Ramsey. I saw you were new here, so I stopped by to say hello. Welcome to Maplewood Heights." "Hello, Officer Ramsey." "Thank you," Sophia replied, her voice polite but distant. "I'm Sophia Carter." "Carter," Ramsey repeated the name, his eyes sweeping over Sophia and then the large house behind her. "You live here alone? You must have a good job to own a house in this area. What do you do?" he asked, his questions so inquisitive. They were almost an interrogation in disguise. Sophia frowned at the indiscretion, but she was used to these kinds of inquiries. "I'm just a civil servant," she replied flatly, not wanting to reveal her title to a stranger. even a police officer. And yes, I live alone. Ramsey nodded, but his eyes were still filled with suspicion and implicit judgment. He seemed to doubt that a black woman could own a property like this on her own in a neighborhood that was predominantly white and well-to-do. A civil servant. That sounds important, he said, his voice a little sarcastic. Then you understand the importance of neighborhood security, huh? He began to talk about how quiet Maplewood Heights was, but also dangerous, and how the local police force sometimes lacked the resources to ensure absolute safety. He described himself as a dedicated man who kept an eye on the area even after hours, acting as an unofficial security guard. Then he got to the point, his tone becoming more ambiguous. You know, Carter, good neighbors often contribute a little bit to make sure the neighborhood is always specially cared for. A small fee, voluntary, to the Neighborhood Watch Fund. It gives us, people like me, the incentive and the means to patrol more often to keep a closer eye on houses like yours, especially newcomers. They're usually very good-natured about this. You know what I mean? Sophia looked Ramsey straight in the eye. The so-called Neighborhood Protection Fund and voluntary fees were clearly just a blatant demand for protection money, using his position as a police officer to extort money from people, especially newcomers he thought were easy to bully or had something shady to hide. His brazenness and abuse of power made her feel both indignant and contemptuous. Thank you for your concern, Officer Ramsey, she said, her voice still polite, but slightly cold. However, I have confidence in the tax system and the public, services the city provides. I pay my taxes and expect to receive adequate protection from the regular police force. I do not believe it is necessary or appropriate to pay any additional unofficial fees. Sophia's tactful but firm refusal wiped the wry smile off Ramsey's face. His eyes flashed with anger and hurt. He had never expected the black woman to reject his proposal so bluntly. Oh, really? He smirked. Suit yourself. But remember, everything has a price here. Hopefully you'll never need my special attention again. He left the sentence hanging in the air, then turned, walked quickly to the patrol car, and drove away, leaving Sophia with a feeling of unease and unease. She knew this encounter might not be the end. True to Sophia's premonition, just 3 days later, on a Saturday afternoon, while she was watering the plants in the front yard, John Ramsey's familiar patrol car appeared again. This time he did not stop at the side of the road, but drove straight into her driveway, blocking the entrance. He got out of the car, no longer awkward, but instead arrogant and angry. Sophia put down the watering can and stood up straight, bracing herself for the encounter. She knew there would be no more hints this time. We need to talk, Carter, Ramsey said curtly, without even saying hello. I've given you a few days to think about it. What do you think of that protection fee thing I mentioned the other day? Don't pretend you don't understand. In this neighborhood, everyone has to be reasonable to get along. Sophia crossed her arms over her chest, her eyes fixed on Ramsey, showing no fear. Officer Ramsey, I thought we were clear about this. I'll say it one last time. I will not pay you any money or any protection fund you've invented. It's illegal, and you're abusing your position. Illegal? Ramsey sneered, his face red with anger. Who said it was illegal? These are the rules here. These are my rules. If you don't pay, you're disrespecting me, disrespecting the rules of this neighborhood. Seeing Sophia's determined, unwavering expression, Ramsey's rage and vicious prejudice exploded uncontrollably. He moved closer to Sophia, so close that she could smell his sour sweat and cigarette-scented breath. He began to spew insults and slurs, no longer hiding his racism and misogyny. Where does a black woman like you get the money to buy a big, nice house like this in Maplewood Heights? He growled, spit almost hitting Sophia in the face. I bet you're hooking up with some rich white guy, or you're in some dirty business, dealing drugs or laundering money or something. You're the one who's tainting this whole neighborhood. Sophia gritted her teeth, fighting the rage that was swelling in her chest. She felt the blood rush to her face. Never in her challenging career had she faced such a direct and vile insult on her own doorstep. "Listen," Ramsey continued, his voice growing more vicious, his veined hand pointing straight at Sophia's face. "You're not welcome in this neighborhood. Who do you think you are, lecturing me? What the hell do you know about the law?" He sneered savagely. "Or do you want me to check your house for anything interesting? Who knows? Maybe I'll find evidence of your illegal dealings." Sophia's heart pounded with anger, but her FBI veteran's rationality kept her calm. She knew she couldn't let her emotions get the best of her. She had to handle this situation smartly and safely. She took a step back, creating a safe distance, her voice cold as steel. "Officer Ramsey, you are overstepping your bounds. You are being abusive, threatening, and a gross abuse of authority. I demand that you leave my premises immediately. If you do not, I will not hesitate to use all legal means necessary to protect myself." Sophia's harsh words and unyielding attitude were like a slap in the face to Ramsey's sick pride. He couldn't believe that a black woman he despised would dare to stand up and challenge his self-proclaimed absolute power in this area. The anger, humiliation, and vague fear of being reported to his superiors made him lose his mind. He decided that he had to resort to the ultimate measure to quell this resistance, to make Sophia fear and submit. In an act of madness and desperation, John Ramsey reached into the holster on his hip and pulled out his shiny Glock pistol. He didn't point the gun directly at Sophia, but the black muzzle was pointed at her clearly and menacingly. They were only a few yards away. The air was thick. The birdsong seemed to have stopped. "You think I don't dare to do something to you?" Ramsey roared, his voice thick with anger, the hand holding the gun shaking slightly. "Here, I am the law. I'll say it again. Either you pay me protection money, or you will regret it. I may only warn you today, but don't make me come back again. An unfortunate accident can completely happen to a newcomer living alone like you." He tried to create a vague cover of threat, but the action of drawing the gun said it all. In, say, that moment, time seemed to stop. Sophia felt a chill run down her spine. Danger was imminent. But instead of panicking, her trained brain sped up. She assessed the situation. Ramsey was out of control. His actions were reckless and illegal. But he had a gun. She couldn't confront him head-on. She needed another solution, a smarter solution, one that utilized resources this corrupt cop never expected. She kept her eyes fixed on Ramsey, showing no fear that might embolden him. And then she made a bold decision. To the utter astonishment of John Ramsey, who was waiting to see utter terror on the face of the black woman he despised, Sophia Carter did something completely unexpected. She did not cry. She did not beg. She did not collapse. Instead, she slowly, very calmly, put her hand in the pocket of her coat. Ramsey frowned, the gun in his hand dropping a little in confusion. "What? What are you doing?" he stammered, trying to keep his voice firm, but wavering. "Don't play tricks. Are you going to take out your weapon? I'll shoot you right now." But Sophia had no intention of reaching for a weapon. She pulled out her smartphone. Her thumb flew across the touchscreen, opening her contacts and selecting a number saved under the simple name Robert T. Her gaze never left Ramsey's pale face. A cold, deep, unfathomable gaze. She raised the phone to her ear. The ringing of the phone rang through the tense air. Ramsey swallowed, the gun shaking in his hand. He was starting to feel like something was seriously wrong. "Robert." Sophia's voice was surprisingly calm, with just the slightest hint of urgency. Enough for the person on the other end to sense the urgency. "This is Sophia Carter." She emphasized her last name, a name that might not have meant much to Ramsey, but which carried special weight with the person she was calling. She continued, her eyes still fixed on Ramsey, who was beginning to sweat. "Sorry to bother you on the weekend, but I'm at my new home. Yes, 12 Elm Street, Maplewood Heights. I'm having a bit of a serious problem with one of your officers. She glanced quickly at the name tag on Ramsey's chest, reading it out loud. His name is John Ramsey. Serial number. Let me see. 347. Then she lowered her voice dramatically, but still loud enough for Ramsey to hear every word. Officer Ramsey is currently pointing a pistol at me right in front of my house. She paused, as if to give the person on the other end of the line and Ramsey time to digest the shocking information. The reason? Apparently he wants me to pay some sort of neighborhood protection fee of his own making. Sophia's words were like hammer blows to John Ramsey's mind. Robert? Who was Robert? The sheriff? Impossible. The Carter. The name sounded familiar. And then, as she read his badge number and described his actions to this Robert, a terrifying truth flashed through his mind. Robert Thompson. Sheriff Robert Thompson. He knew the sheriff. And this woman, Sophia Carter, deputy director of the FBI. He remembered seeing her picture on an internal bulletin or at a press conference. Holy, what has he done? He just demanded protection money, insulted, and worst of all, pointed a gun at an FBI deputy director who actually knew and called his boss directly. Ramsey's face was as white as chalk. The gun in his hand clattered to the brick floor of the front yard. He staggered, his knees shaking so hard they threatened to collapse. The arrogance, the smugness, the racism, all vanished in an instant, replaced by utter terror, a fear that gripped his entire being. Wait, please, Ramsey stammered, his voice cracking, pleading. He almost knelt before Sophia. You, Carter. Is it really Deputy Director Sophia Carter? Tears began to stream down his face. Oh my God, no, it can't be. Please. It's just a terrible misunderstanding, a stupid joke. I'm stressed. I didn't mean it like that. Really. He clasped his hands together and begged, his voice filled with despair. Please hang up. Please hang up. Don't say anything to the chief. I'm sorry, 1,000 times sorry. Please forgive me this time. Don't ruin my life. I have a wife and children. Please. Ramsey's utter collapse, his utter cowardice was on full display. The man who had been threatening so fiercely a moment before was now on his knees, begging like a beggar. Sophia looked at him coldly, without pity. She didn't hang up. She just listened to his belated pleas and waited. Waited for justice to come. Less than 5 minutes after Sophia's fateful phone call, the familiar siren of a police car sounded in the distance, getting closer and more urgent. The sound was like a death sentence to John Ramsey, making him tremble and despair even more. 2 patrol cars and an unmarked black SUV pulled up in front of 12 Elm Street, their red and blue lights flashing, shattering the quiet of the suburban neighborhood. The SUV door swung open, and Sheriff Robert Thompson stepped out. He was dressed in civilian clothes, but he still exuded the authority and decisiveness of a leader. His face was solemn and worried as he took in the scene before him. His longtime friend, FBI Deputy Director Sophia Carter, standing calmly in front of the house, while his officer, John Ramsey, was in a near-collapse state, his face pale and his clothes disheveled. Ramsey's gun was still lying on the tile floor. Robert Thompson wasted no time. He marched straight toward Ramsey, his eyes piercing his subordinate. He didn't need to ask much. Sophia's brief but informative call and Ramsey's dire state said it all. "Ramsey!" Robert Thompson's voice boomed, deep and steely, over the still distant sirens. "Explain what the hell is going on here." Ramsey jumped up, stammering to come up with some explanation, blaming it on a misunderstanding, work stress, just a joke said in the heat of the moment. But Robert Thompson had no time or patience for such excuses. He cut him off firmly. "Enough, you idiot!" Thompson shouted. "Give me your weapon badge and radio now." His voice broke no resistance. "You are suspended indefinitely." Effective immediately, pending the outcome of the investigation. "Now get in that patrol car." He pointed to one of the 2 squad cars that had just arrived, where 2 more officers were ready to escort Ramsey. John Ramsey knew it was over. There was no going back. He unbuckled his tool belt, shaking and humiliated, surrendering his weapon, badge, and radio. He didn't dare look the sheriff or Sophia in the face. He simply mumbled, following orders, and 2 other officers led him in heavy silence into the squad car. The car sped away, carrying the recently enforced officer turned suspect away from the scene. After Ramsey's car was out of sight, Thompson turned back to face Sophia. His stern expression softened, replaced by guilt, shame, and even anger at his subordinate's behavior. "Sophia," he began, his voice low, "I really don't know how to express my apology. What you were put through in your own home by one of my officers was unacceptable. Ramsey's actions are a stain, a disgrace, to the entire Maplewood Heights Police Department." Sophia looked at her old friend and nodded. Her professional composure was still there, but there was a hint of weariness and deep disappointment in her eyes. "Thank you for coming so quickly, Robert. I knew you wouldn't let this go." "Absolutely not," Thompson said, his voice full of determination. "I will personally oversee the internal investigation. There will be no mercy or cover-up. I assure you, he will be held accountable. He does not deserve to wear this uniform again." He looked around the neighborhood. A few curious neighbors had started to peek out of their windows or watch from a distance. "Do you want to come in? I'll have someone secure the scene and collect the gun as evidence. Do you need anything else?" "No, I'm fine," Sophia replied. "I just need some quiet time, but I'll give you a formal statement whenever you need it." "I understand," Thompson nodded. "Get some rest. I'll be in touch soon." He signaled the remaining officers to begin securing the scene and collecting evidence, then returned to his car, angry and determined to clean up his force. This would be a costly lesson. The internal investigation into John Ramsey's misconduct was conducted with speed and seriousness under the direct direction and supervision of Chief Robert Thompson, who was determined to turn this shameful incident into an opportunity to clean up the force and send a strong message that corruption, abuse of power, and racism will not be tolerated. FBI Deputy Director Sophia Carter's detailed and comprehensive testimony as a victim and eyewitness provided a solid foundation for the investigation. She provided a clear, coherent account of the entire episode, from the initial encounter, the phony demands for protection money, to the escalation into racially charged insults and culminating in Ramsey pulling out a gun. Her credibility and experience as a senior FBI official gave her testimony particular weight. When confronted by internal affairs investigators, John Ramsey could not deny his actions. Initially, he tried to deflect, blaming it on a misunderstanding and stress. But when faced with Sophia's testimony and the possibility of other evidence, neighborhood security cameras, fingerprints on the gun, etc., he was forced to admit most of the truth. Although he still tried to downplay the severity, he admitted to demanding money, using inappropriate language, and pulling out a gun, but insisted that it was just a fearful act in the heat of the moment and that he had no intention of harming anyone. However, that excuse was invalid. The act of drawing a gun and pointing it at a citizen, regardless of whether or not one is fired, is a serious violation of the use of force rules and a clear threat. Ramsey's work record was also thoroughly reviewed. The results showed that, although there had been no incidents as serious as this one, there had been several previous complaints from citizens about his arrogant attitude, inappropriate language, and signs of discrimination. Unfortunately, those complaints had not been thoroughly handled or had been ignored, possibly due in part to deference or lack of oversight in the previous system. The Sophia Carter incident exposed not only the wrongdoing of an individual but also potential loopholes in management. With undeniable evidence and testimony, the conclusion of the internal investigation was clear. John Ramsey committed a series of serious violations, including abusing his position and power to extort money, using racist words and actions, insulting citizens, illegally using force, pulling a gun to threaten, and seriously violating police professional ethics. Immediately after the investigation, Chief Robert Thompson signed a decision to fire John Ramsey from the Maplewood Heights Police Department. His 15-year career in the department ended in disgrace. But the story doesn't end there. Realizing the seriousness of the case, especially the use of a weapon to threaten and the element of extortion under the color of the law, Robert Thompson turned the entire case file over to the district attorney's office. After reviewing it, prosecutors determined that Ramsey's actions constituted a criminal offense and decided to prosecute. John Ramsey was charged with a number of serious state felonies, including extortion under the color of the law, taking advantage of the police position to demand protection money, second-degree assault with a deadly weapon, pulling out a gun and pointing it at Sophia was considered aggravated assault, terroristic threats, threats of harm or injury to Sophia, and official misconduct, abuse of position to commit illegal acts. Former officer John Ramsey now faced justice not only as a disgraced man, but as a criminal defendant. The trial of former police officer John Ramsey took place a few months later and attracted some local attention. The image of a police officer who was supposed to protect the people using his uniform and gun to extort, insult, and threaten a black woman who had just moved into the neighborhood caused outrage and indignation. In court, Ramsey looked haggard and had lost all of his former bravado. Faced with overwhelming evidence, including detailed and authoritative testimony from FBI Deputy Director Sophia Carter and his own admissions during the internal investigation, he had little chance of making a convincing defense. Ramsey's attorneys tried to blame work pressure, a momentary mistake, and asked for leniency, but the seriousness of the crime could not be denied. Sophia Carter, despite her busy schedule, made time to appear and testify in court. She presented her case calmly and professionally, without any personal animosity, focusing on describing the facts of what happened and the defendant's violation of the law. Her presence and testimony solidified the prosecution's case. After a brief trial, the jury quickly returned a verdict. John Ramsey was found guilty on all the main charges against him. At the sentencing hearing, the presiding judge had harsh words for the former police officer. He stressed that Ramsey's actions were not only an insult to the victim, but also a blatant betrayal of the police officer's oath of honor, severely eroding public trust in law enforcement. He specifically condemned the defendant's racist and blatant abuse of power. There is no room for discrimination or corruption among those entrusted with the duty of upholding justice, the judge said. To point a gun at an unarmed citizen, motivated by greed and prejudice, is despicable and intolerable. Given the seriousness of the charges, particularly the use of a weapon to intimidate and the systematic extortion, Judge John Ramsey was sentenced to 6 years in prison, a sentence that sends a clear message that no one, including the police, is above the law. John Ramsey was devastated upon hearing the verdict. His dream of a comfortable life in a wealthy neighborhood where he had assumed absolute power had been shattered. Now he faced prison bars, paying the price for his stupid and cruel actions. On a weekend afternoon, weeks after the trial, Sophia Carter stood on her porch, a cup of tea in hand, looking out at the quiet neighborhood of Maplewood Heights. Everything seemed normal again. The house was truly hers now, no longer shrouded in the shadow of intimidation or discrimination. Justice had been served, but she didn't feel joy or elation. There was only a fleeting sense of relief, mixed with a sense of exhaustion and a tinge of sadness. She knew that her case had been resolved so quickly and thoroughly in no small part because of her position as Deputy Director of the FBI and her personal relationship with Sheriff Robert Thompson. If she had been just Sophia Carter, a black woman who had recently arrived, would Ramsey have been punished so appropriately? Or would the case have been ignored, downplayed, and she would have continued to live in fear or been forced to leave? That question made her realize a harsh truth. Injustice and discrimination still persist, even in places that seem civilized and safe. The fight against it is not only fought on the legal front or in large campaigns, but also exists in every corner of daily life. She took a deep breath, smelling the flowers in the garden. The incident, though unwanted, became a powerful reminder of why she chose the path of law enforcement, why she worked so hard to get to her current position. It was to fight for justice, for equality, for the right of all people, regardless of skin color or status, to live in safety and respect. Sophia's eyes became determined. She would not let this terrible experience break her or make her lose faith. On the contrary, it would only strengthen her. She would continue her work at the FBI with a new determination, always aware of her responsibility to contribute to building a better society, even in the smallest of daily actions. True peace comes not only from living in a nice neighborhood, but also from knowing that you are doing everything you can to fight for what is right. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this story. If you like this content, please click like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next meaningful stories, because tomorrow we will have another meaningful story for you.